All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Robert Salcido. I'm the program director with Texas Pride Community Foundation, and we welcome you to the 2025 Community Impact Grants Program info session. Today's info session will hopefully give you some additional details on the grants program we have open at the current time, as well as some insight into what we fund and what we don't fund, and also an opportunity at the end of today's session to answer any questions that you might have. I will go through a big portion of the beginning of this is going to be about the grants process itself. And then I'll touch a little bit on the platform that we're using this year. We are using a brand new platform, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So as many of you have probably seen in the email or the newsletters that have gone out, our 2025 Community Impact Grant Program did open up this past Friday on April 23rd, and it will remain open until July 24th of this year at 11:59 p.m. So you have approximately 60 days or so to complete the application process, and I'll go over a little bit more about the timeline here in just a little bit as well. For those of you that are new to or just learning about Texas Pride Community Foundation, or those of you that have been with us in the past, you will have probably noticed the name change. We were formerly Texas Pride Impact Funds, and January of this year, we did fully move under our own 501c3, our own community foundation. We had previously been fiscally sponsored by the Dallas Foundation, and we are 100% on our own. And so our name change reflects that change for us as well. However, our commitment to the community and what we want to achieve for the community has not changed. Texas Pride Community Foundation, we inspire giving and investment to secure equitable opportunities that serve and enrich the lives of LGBTQ plus Texans for generations to come. What does this mean? As a community foundation, it is our goal to provide funding to organizations across the state that are doing the work on the ground. We are a community foundation that does put priority on particular focus communities and populations, particularly our rural communities, our communities that are under-resourced or not as resourced as other communities throughout the state, as well as those communities. And we'll go over a little bit more about what that looks like in depth. But as our name has changed, but our commitment to what we want to achieve for our community has not. Um, our TPCF, or Texas Pride Community Foundation, we are the leading progressive statewide LGBTQ community foundation. We're actually the only LGBTQ-based community foundation in the state. And we do drive attention to the dynamic and diverse lives and experiences of LGBTQ folks, and address their needs and support their dreams through a vast and active network of donors and organizations across the state. As I said, we were the only community foundation that is specifically designed for LGBT plus people here in Texas. And we're actually one of just a handful of foundations across the US that are specifically devoted to the LGBT plus community. TPCF does boldly support transformational change and racial equity here in Texas. And you'll, throughout the info session, you'll kind of see some themes that align to that, particularly on those organizations that we fund, and what are some of the requirements that we maintain for our funding organizations. Our long-term vision, includes achieving 100 million in assets under management with donor-advised funds and annual fundraising, so that we can support a 6 million in annual grant making and 1.5 million in operating expenses by 2045. 2018 was our first year in providing grants across Texas. And so we do have a very lofty and active goal that we want to reach by the year 2045, because we know that our community needs the support, especially for those smaller organizations, those grassroots organizations that don't typically qualify for funding from larger foundations or larger organizations. Since November of 2018, Texas Pride Community Foundation has granted over 2.2 million to Texas organizations across the state. We do that through three different grant buckets. The first one being our major annual campaign, which is our Community Impact Grant, which is the grant cycle that is currently open. And this is meant to offer grant funding to, again, grassroots, smaller organizations across the state. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here just a little bit. Our Queer Texas Crisis Fund, or QTCF Rapid Response, is just as what it says. It's a rapid response fund that we use in times of need. And it is not a grant application process. The QTCF is, we identify organizations throughout the state that may need funds for various different reasons. As an example, in the past, we've provided funding because of disaster relief when it comes to flooding in the Houston area. During COVID, we provided COVID relief to organizations across the state. And then, as many of you know, our state has a reputation for, you know, deliberately trying to oppress the transgender community and our gender expansive community. And so we've used our QTCF funding to provide funds for trans-led and trans-specific organizations as well. We also have our Texas Health Impact Cohort. This is a 3-year cohort that is specifically designed and to impact organizations that are working around HIV. It's not HIV in terms of the health aspect of it or the medical side of it, but looking at other things like storytelling, breaking down stigma, getting people back into care, testing, just general education around, you know, knowing your status. And so that is our Texas Health Impact Cohort. Our current cohort is wrapping up this year. It's our 3rd year. We are excited to announce that we are going to be submitting or putting out an application for organizations to submit for the next 3 years, which will start in January of 2026. So be on the lookout for that grant opportunity. Whereas our Community Impact Grant is a one-time annual grant, as well as the QTCF Rapid Response, the Texas Health Impact Cohort Grant is a 3-year cohort that has guaranteed funding for 3 years. And if you qualify for the cohort each year. And so, like I said, that will be coming out later this summer, so be on the lookout for that. I do want to emphasize that even if you've received one grant from one bucket, you still qualify to participate in the other buckets as well. And so if you know, you want to apply for the Community Impact Grant this cycle, and then when the Texas Health Impact Cohort comes out, you're also able to do that as well. And we certainly encourage folks to do that as it builds capacity for your organization. Texas Pride Community Foundation does participate in trust-based philanthropy, and I'll cover a little bit on what that means and how we worked into that process. But in 2021, we did have a community-based strategic planning working group, our grants process vision team, that recommended several process improvements for us. The team was composed of community stakeholders from across Texas with experience and knowledge of grant-making trends and best practices. But what does it actually mean to offer trust-based philanthropy? You know, the first thing that we did is a lower barrier and less time-intensive application. Our goal is that our application only takes 30 minutes or less to complete. Some folks take a little bit longer, some take a bit less than that. But in general, we're looking at 30 minutes or less to complete the application. Our foundation behind that is that we want organizations to be able to continue to do the work that they're doing on the ground and not having to worry about a long, time-intensive application. For those of you that have written grants before, know that sometimes they could take hours, days, weeks, and sometimes even months for some applications. But again, ours, we want to make sure that it is as low barrier as possible. We want to have less restrictive funding. It is our belief that organizations know the best of what funds they need and where it needs to go. So we're not going to tell you specifically that the funding is for one program or another, or one project or anything like that. We leave it up to organizations to determine where they need to spend the money within the organization. And so it's unrestricted general operations rather than requesting a project plan. And like I said, that gives you more flexibility to use the funds where your greatest need is. And who best to know what your need is other than yourself and your organization. And so we leave that in y'all's hands as well. We have done away with time-consuming grantee reports, and we've replaced them with check-ins and brief surveys that you'll receive. For this particular grant cycle, we are implementing 2 surveys a year. One you'll receive at the midpoint, so 6 months in, and then one right before the 12 months of the grant cycle ends. So you'll receive those. And then you may receive a request to do a check-in with me or another member of our program staff. Um, Sometimes by Zoom. If I'm happy to be traveling in your area, I always try to visit our grantees as well, so I can kind of see things in person and get an idea a little bit more about the work that you're doing as well. We also have a more clearly defined grant application and a rating process. Your grant application is not just looked at by myself as a program director or other staff members or board members of our organization. We actually pull in folks from the community across the state who also score the applications so we can make them as equitable as possible. And we look at 3 different scoring indexes. We have your geographic index, which tells us what part of the state you're in, how resourced your area is, or how under-resourced it is. We also look at your alignment, our alignment index, which is how closely do you align with our desires and our belief that we want to support the LGBT plus community. And then we also look at the narrative response score. Your application for the grant is pretty much in 2 sections. One is more your organizational information. So we'll ask information about your leadership, your budget size, what type of programs you have, how do you serve the community, those types of things. And then we have 4 narrative questions that we ask that are part of the actual application itself. And these narrative questions are scored on clarity as well as strength of your response. And those are the ones that are scored by our community volunteers throughout the state. And so we do use a weighted score. And again, this gives us a greater opportunity to offer more equitable distribution of the funds throughout the state. And we are also using a highly configurable cloud-based grants management software platform that we're able to deploy. And when you set it up, and I'll talk a little bit more about this here in a little bit, but it gives you the opportunity to set up an organizational profile and then individual profiles under that so that if you're collaborating with somebody on writing the grant, or if you need somebody to step in and work on a portion of it, you can do that as well. And it just makes things more efficient so that we can offer, again, the low barrier when it comes to completing the applications, as well as any reports or surveys that we send out to the community grantees. So Texas Pride Community Foundation's work reflects the dynamic and diverse makeup of our LGBT plus community. It's intentionally broad to address the full suite of dreams and needs. Part of our core ideologies is around equity and justice. And when we talk about equity, we know in our current environment how that's kind of the buzzword is, frowned upon. And it's our current administration, is doing away with it. But regardless of everything that is happening around us, we are still keeping that as part of our core ideology and centering around that equity and justice in all that we do. And because we're doing that, we are prioritizing a focus on historically under-resourced communities to spur innovation, build capacity within your organizations, expand access to community, especially in rural and border communities, as well as in urban centers. And so we're staying committed to the work, regardless of what's happening around us. We know that it's important to remain an equity-based organization, especially around racial equity. So I talked earlier about our focus communities and populations. This is just an example of some of our focus areas. When we talk about underserved geographies, that includes rural communities, border towns, and small cities in our urban segments. As an example of urban segments, we know that we'll use Dallas as an example. We know Dallas is a well-resourced area of the state. However, there are some urban segments within the city of Dallas that don't receive that same type of resources. For example, South Dallas. South Dallas, we would consider an under-resourced community within the broader area of Dallas. And so we do look at those as part of wanting to focus on underserved geographies. We also focus on people of transgender experience. This includes gender expansive folks, intersex folks, everybody that is, within that gender expansive community is a focused population for us, as is people of color. Looking at in terms of like age placement, we looking at seniors, youth, and people with disabilities as being priority areas for us as well. We also look at displaced peoples, and this could be immigrants, homeless youth, refugees, and incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals. And so, as this is a snapshot of our focus communities and populations, this is not meant to dissuade anybody from applying if you don't fall into these areas, but more so just letting you know that we do have this focus, and we do prioritize communities being served that fall within these categories. So what do we fund? So our grant making to nonprofit organizations and organizations with fiscal sponsorship is intentionally broad for initiatives providing direct support for LGBTQ plus persons and communities in Texas. Again, our focus as an organization is to fund LGBTQ groups, but they do not have to be LGBTQ plus specific. Most of them are, but if it's an organization that serves the broader community, but they do have programming that's intentionally set up or intentionally inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community, they are also eligible to apply. Our 2025 grant program, again, funds for general operating support. So applications are not required to identify projects or submit project plans. This year, we are anticipating to award up to $215,000, and that's up to $10,000 per organization. Our funds distribution runs generally between $3,000 to $10,000. When you complete the application, it doesn't ask for an amount that your organization requests. Rather than that, we provide the funding and the amount per organization based on the scoring model and the scoring matrix that we have in place. So we do have an external focus by organizations where we encourage the enhancement of civic life. But these are just some of the other areas where we do look for and we do have some priority around. And that's increasing the ability for LGBT people to vote. So voter education is a really big area for us. Increasing the LGBTQ plus community's knowledge of issues that impact our community. So again, education, advocacy, we're looking at those types of things. Increasing the number of and support for LGBT plus folks in civic and governmental leadership in local communities and statewide. And encouraging communities' advocacy to end discrimination and create affirming policies. I do just want to offer just a little bit of additional information on these last two that I just mentioned in regards to civic and governmental leadership in local communities and statewide, and then advocacy work. We do not fund 501c4 organizations, nor do we fund any type of lobbying. So everything that is around advocacy or governmental leadership, it's around the education and building communities and stronger communities. So I just want to emphasize that we do not cover any type of lobbying efforts. We also look for organizations that are securing the support of non-LGBT plus folks in advancing cultural acceptance and ending discrimination against LGBT plus people. So building allyships and building allyships not only with individuals, but with businesses, religious groups, just building overall support for our community as well. So what are some of the things that we don't fund? We don't fund applications from individuals. So you do have to, be an organization. We don't fund national organizations or local affiliates, except for programs developed at the local level or to meet local needs in Texas. And I'll expand a little bit on this one as well. A good example of an organization that we would fund that technically falls under the umbrella of a national organization would be an organization like PFLAG. Because PFLAG is very specific to their local community and they build programs and initiatives that are for their local program only, we will fund those types of organizations. Another good example is Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is a part of a national umbrella, but they are regionalized, and so the work that they do is meant for their local regions only. And so those are some examples of national organizations that we would, or local affiliates of national organizations that we would consider. However, with that being said, PFLAG National wouldn't be able to apply, or Planned Parenthood America Federation would not be able to apply. Just their local affiliate we would take into consideration for those. We don't fund for any initiatives outside the state of Texas. All the work and all the funding that we provide is to impact residents of the state of Texas. We do not fund endowment funds, annual campaigns, capital campaigns, donor recognition events, or event sponsorships. We also don't accept applications from government agencies. We do not accept applications, or we don't fund organizations that do not support transformational change and inclusivity of all LGBTQ plus individuals, as well as racial equity in Texas. And that one I'll touch briefly on, that we really emphasize on organizations that are part of our community that may exclude certain parts of our community. And so we are looking for full inclusivity, full acceptance of every part of our community. We don't accept more than one application per organization per year. And I'll touch a little bit on this one as well. The only exception to this would be if the organization that is applying also fiscally sponsors smaller organizations or smaller groups, then we can have multiple applications that are paid or that are funded under one EIN number, or one, again, it's for the main organization and then their fiscally sponsored organizations. But the one application per organization applies. For example, one organization can't make two applications because they have two separate programs. It would be only one application per organization. We also don't cover for any academic research. And then those that are funded through TPCF have to be organizations with a 501c3 federal designation as a nonprofit entity. Or they have to be fiscally sponsored. So if you don't have a 501c3 and you're not fiscally sponsored by a certified nonprofit, then unfortunately you would not qualify for funding with TPCF as well. So again, just to go over some important dates, the application opens on Friday, May 23rd, 2025. Which was just a couple of days ago, a few days ago. So it's open and active at this time. The application deadline and it's actually Thursday, July 24th. Apologize for the mistype there, but it's Thursday, July 24th at 11:59 p.m. We anticipate the applications will be processed and reviewed and scored at the 3 different levels that we do our scoring, with announcements on or around October of this year. And so definitely funding will be provided at that point. And then that is when the grant cycle technically begins, is when the funding is received. As I mentioned before, we did switch over to a new platform that we're using, Foundant. It is a really user-friendly, beautiful website that is created, again, to be efficient and to provide access to everyone. If you're new to TPCF, you'll create a new account. Or if you're returning to TPCF, you're also going to have to create a new account as well. So everybody, regardless whether you're a past grantee or not, will create a new account by clicking on where it says they're creating a new account. You'll have to create the organizational profile first, which will ask, name of your organization, EIN numbers, your contact information. If you're not the executive director or the CEO, it'll ask for that information as well. And then it'll also ask for information regarding you as an individual. And so you'll fall under the umbrella of the organizational profile. And so once you create that, then it'll give you an opportunity to create or complete an eligibility quiz. And that eligibility quiz will just help us further determine whether your organization is eligible. Once you complete the eligibility quiz, which consists of 3 questions only, then it'll give you an opportunity from there to show you what grant cycles you qualify for. It's a really simple process. You also have the opportunity, once you create the profile, to print or download a copy of a PDF of the entire application so you can review it and know what questions we're going to ask, so that you can gather that information if you don't have everything at your fingertips. Again, the platform is super easy. It's user friendly. However, if you do run into any hiccups or anything like that, my contact information is on the opening screen of that page. Of course, always feel free to reach out to me directly. Email is usually the quickest way. And then if I can't answer it by email, then we can certainly, of course, set up a time for a Zoom call or a phone call if needed. And so really easy on there. We're really excited for the new platform that we're releasing, and hope that it's a easier and a more efficient process for all of our community stakeholders and our community grantees. I also just want to add, as a last thing, is that we want to remain as equitable and inclusive as possible. Because of this, we want to make sure, and we do have a commitment to ensure that people with disabilities, people experiencing technology gaps, people needing an application in a different language other than English, that we provide reasonable accommodations. If you fall into any of these categories and you're unable to complete the application as it's presented to you, and if we need to look at other ways that we might be able to have you completed, please reach out to me directly as well. Again, we want to make sure that we are being fully inclusive to everyone in our community, regardless of what the barrier might be, so that we can find a solution to allow folks to have access to the application and potential funding through Texas Pride Community Foundation. So that is all the information I have for you all. I'm going to go ahead and take it off from screen share right now, and open it up to questions that you may have. Feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to put it in the chat. And I do want to answer those questions for you. And before we do that, just to let you know that this is the recording.